Good morning, H2O Church, and Merry Christmas. I hope that yesterday was just a day full of worship and just great connection with family and friends. And so glad that you're joining us here online here the day after Christmas to connect with God. I just wanted to lead us through a little quick devotional and reflection after Christmas. So the season of Advent is all about remembering the coming of Jesus. It's actually a season of waiting. And so we start Advent weeks ago, and we remember that for generations and generations, God's people waited faithfully for him to come. And what we celebrate on Christmas morning is that Jesus came, that God came in the flesh to be with us, to rescue us, to ultimately go to the cross and to die for us. And so what I want to do today is just offer a few quick reflections on how do we live after Advent, or how do we live in light of Christmas and what God has done for us? And I just have three thoughts that I'd like to share with you. The first is this: I think that we live in gratitude. You know, the Christmas story is just marvelous and wonderful and mysterious and in some ways confusing, because it's almost unbelievable or inconceivable that God himself would come as one of us, as a person in the form of a helpless child, right, to be with us. And when you think about all the attributes of God, right, his power, his sovereignty, his working in creation, his being before all things and before time, and that he entered time and space to be with us so that he might rescue us, that he might take away the sin of the world. And so I just think that as we marvel at the Christmas story, that God came with us, that we have to live in gratitude. That's the invitation for us. I think of Psalm 98 as a beautiful psalm of thanksgiving. And as I think about what we just celebrated this season and yesterday and Christmas, I think it's just beautiful language for us to really cling to. It says this in Psalm 98, "Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He has remembered his love and his faithfulness to Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God." It goes on to command us to shout for joy. It tells us that the sea and the creation and everything is joining together to worship and to praise and give thanks to God. And what we're doing in this season, I think, is yes, we are remembering what God has done for us and coming to be with us, to be like us and to save us. But I think what we're actually doing is beyond that. We are worshiping who he is, right? Because what he's done reveals who he is. And I think of that line, right? That he has remembered his love and his faithfulness for his people Israel. We worship a God who is for us, a God who loves us deeply, is wanting to be in relationship with us. And he is not doing it begrudgingly. He is doing it out of the overflow of who he is. And so as we think about this past year, and I know that there's so many things that we could sort of be discouraged by, that, you know, we might be tempted to complain about as we think about the difficulty. And for sure, there were so many difficulties this past year. But as we look back and we think about this season that we've just come out of, and we look to the new year, I just wonder if God might be inviting you to be grateful, to be full of gratitude, to remember the ways in which he continues to show up. He continues to come to us and to make himself known to us. And just take time to think through that. Make a list even of, in this past year, how has God continued to be present, continued to show up in your life? And then pray that that would lead you into a space of worship as you recall those things. So I think that we respond in worship and gratitude. I think the second thing is that there's an invitation here to be humble. God's inviting us to live in humility. Again, I think about, of all the attributes of God, of all the things that make him who he is, what's so astounding about the Christmas story is that our God is also humble. He is all of those lofty, amazing, marvelous things, and he is also humble. I think of John 1:14, a passage that we taught on in this past series, God with Us, about the Word became flesh. Jesus put on skin and made his dwelling among us, that he came into this world. I think of Philippians chapter 2, which talks about the way that Jesus humbled himself, that he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he gave that away. He humbled himself and became a servant. And just even the story of the way that he was born, the town in which he was born, the place, the parents to which he was born, all of it just screams humility and lowliness. And when Jesus described his own heart, he called himself gentle and lowly. And so as we think about our lives, as we look ahead to the new year, I just wonder, is God inviting us to join him in his humility, join him in his lowliness? You know, I think that there's this always present temptation and struggle for us to turn inward, to be self-centered, to just seek after our own selfish ambition. And in this new year, as we think back of the Christmas story, are there ways that God is inviting us to join him in his humility, to be like him in this world for the sake of other people? Which leads me to the third thing, which is that I think, how do we live after Advent, after Christmas? I think we live on mission with God. The old, age-old passage, maybe the most famous passage in all the Bible, right? That for God so loved the world that he sent his son, John 3:16. It's so true, and that's what we remember in this season, in this kind of Advent, post-Advent season, that God did not remain far off. God did not stay. He's never been far off, but he did something incredible by coming in the form of a child, and he entered right into the mess and all the dysfunction and all the decay and all the brokenness of this world to be with us and to ultimately die and rise for us. And so the invitation, I think, for us is to be like him in that, to be on mission with him, to take a posture of service and of giving our lives away to other people. And so as you think about this year ahead, and I know that there's been a lot that's happened in our world. There's a lot in our world to be discouraged about. There's a lot of stuff happening that burden us or that frustrate us in this world. And there can be a pull to want to just sort of step out of that mess. But I think the invitation in this season is to do what Jesus did, is to step into that mess and to love the world, to love the people in our lives who maybe don't believe the same things or live the same way that we live, and to just take that posture of humility and of service and to boldly in those spaces proclaim Jesus and to be Jesus, to embody him to the people around us. And so again, as we come to the end of this sort of Advent Christmas season, those are some of my reflections, that we would be a people full of gratitude, people who are humble, and people who are on mission with Jesus. And I think that if we do that, even if, again, I would encourage you to think through in the coming year, what are the specific ways that God might be inviting you to be like him in those ways? I just think that God is going to show up and he's going to work in and through you. He's going to work in and through this church. And it's so exciting to think about, especially in this time that we live in, when I think that the weight and the brokenness of this world is so much on the forefront. It's so obvious and visible. We have this amazing opportunity to imitate our Savior, our King, for the world, for the people around us, for our families and our friends. And so we're excited to see what God is going to do in 2022 in this church, and we can't wait to tell stories of the ways that he used us and worked through us as we become more and more like him.